Hello everyone. All right, so we are going to jump into VBA today and just do a little program to do something that you might not find useful, but will give you a good little introduction into what you can do with VBA. So my problem that I'm going to try and solve today is that I need to generate a whole lot of worksheets for, a list of, let's say, stores. So let's say we've got 100 stores in our region, and we're going to do some data analysis or something, and we want to create a worksheet for every single one of those stores. But it's a lot to, go to every single one of these tabs and type in the store number and then, create a new tab, particularly when you can't type very well. Store 2, store 3, and then you change your mind and you want to actually instead of the store number you want to do the store name, so you have to redo the whole thing again. So this is something that we can do really easily using VBA. So what we're going to do is write down in this worksheet, we'll create a worksheet called stores. So this isn't necessarily how I'd do it, but might follow what a lot of people out there would be doing. So we have another sheet with all the names of the, so let's just say store ID, store name, and we have store 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to, oh, that was quick, all the way down to 100. And who cares about the store name? So we've got all the store numbers there, and it's on the tab called stores. We're going to jump into the VBA editor now. And sorry, I'll just delete these. And before I go to the VBA editor, I'm just going to use the macro recorder to pick up the objects that Excel actually changes to be able to do all this stuff. So I'm going to go to the developer. One little tip, I actually right click the record macro and say add to the quick bar. So now I can just be anywhere and click record. So we're going to start recording a macro. Let's call this insert stores. We'll add it to this workbook. Hit OK. So we're going to say insert a sheet. We're going to rename this sheet to store 1. Hit enter, and that's it. So we'll hit stop. We're going to go into the editor and open up module 1 where that code was just saved. I'm going to insert a new module that I'm going to call insert stores. Let's just call it stores because we might have more things happening in here. And I'm going to take the module from here and just move it into stores. I could have renamed that, but you'll get to learn that every time you hit macro recorder, it keeps on creating modules and adding the next bit of code into here, and it just gets really messy. So I like to keep one of the modules in there called module 1 just so it can dump itself in there. So I've copied that. From module 1. So what we've got here is the steps. So we've got sheets that have been inserted after the active sheet. So straight away, to have an active sheet, you've got to be physically on that sheet for it to be the active sheet. So that's fine. Then we've renamed that sheet. So we've inserted one called sheet 5 and we've renamed it. So one thing you'll see here is that the VBA recorder is very literal. So you've selected the sheet and then you've right clicked it and renamed it. So you can see that there's a little bit of stuff you don't need to do. So we can actually delete the bit that says select and then sheet 5 again. And we can just say insert a sheet after the active sheet, call it name store 1. So we'll just test that that actually works. So I'm going to delete store 1, go back to the editor. Now, when we want to run these, you can either press F5 and it just goes zoom and runs the whole thing, or you can press F8 to step through it. So one thing that I've found here is I've run it and it's failed because it's created the new sheet as sheet 6 instead of sheet 5. So if I rename that, then there it is, store 1, and that worked. Same deal, if I was to run this again, it's going to fail because sheet 6 doesn't exist anymore and it makes it sheet 7, all this sort of stuff. So it's not ideal doing it this way because we're sort of adding a sheet in. It's being named as we've done it, then we're changing the name and you can't reference it very easily. So what we're going to do is bring this back into one line, and this after is actually a parameter on the add method. So we're just going to put put brackets around that. So the sheets.add has another method on that called .name. So we can say name equals store7. And instead of being the active sheet, we're going to replace this with this workbook dot sheets, and then this workbook dot sheets dot count. So what this is doing is inserting after the sheets on this workbook based on the index number. So if you count all the sheets, 1, 2, 3, plus the other ones that we've deleted might be up to 4, 5, 6, or 7, it's going to count the last one on that and then add a new sheet with that index number, which we'll put it at the end. So we'll try running that now. And at the same time, we're going to call that store7 as well. So we run that and store7's been added. So that's worked. Now, there's a little bit of duplication here that we can take out. So we can do this by saying with this workbook and with at the end. And we can say dot sheets. And then anywhere you see this workbook, you can just take that out now because everything is being prepended with this workbook. So if we change this to 8 now, we can say with this workbook, sheets.add after sheets.count with a name of store 8, and that's worked. So we've got a couple of stores added in there now. I'm just going to delete those out because we don't need them. Now what we want to be able to do is loop through everything in these cells. So we can say store IDs equal sheets stores dot range A2 to A101. Now I'm just going to open up the locals window here. Oops, and I've got an extra column in there that I don't need. So I've assigned store IDs to that range, so we can open up store IDs in the locals window and actually look at each one of those. So store IDs, position 1 is store 1. So this is an array of the store numbers. Notice that this is a 2-dimensional array. It has the row and a column. So row 1, column 1, row 2, column 1, row 3, column 1. We could have made this a 1-dimensional array, but we haven't been explicit about that. So Excel's just, or the VBA's just given us a multi-dimensional array. So, but you can see inside that array all those numbers now. So then we have the store IDs, and what we want to do is loop through each one. So we can say for I equals 1, 2, and then we have a VBA method called upper bound, ubound, store IDs. So what ubound does is grabs the maximum number, and then we're going to say do this. I'll just indent this with 2 spaces, and we'll say next I. So we're going to loop through this. We're going to see store IDs is filled. I'm going to go down to the immediate line and just print out the ubound.store store IDs. We can see it's 100. So if we go into store IDs and scroll all the way to the bottom, it's 100, and 100's got store 100 in there. And we've got I as well. So I has been declared as a variable to store the index of the loop that we're on. So we can say for I equals 1, then insert a sheet, and the name's going to be store. And we're just going to replace this name here now with the ID arrays store ID. So we'll say store IDs. So in here will be 1, 1, but you want that 1 to increment each time, so we can replace that with an I. So for this time round, it's going to be insert the name store IDs, and if you hover over that, you'll see it says store 1. So you'll watch down here now. So store 1 gets entered, then it goes to the next I, so now I equals 2, store 2, store 3, store 4, store 5, and we can just hold F8 and it will just loop all the way through that, or we can press F5 to finish, and it's just going to burn through all 100, and then now we're finished. We've got 100 tabs with all these store IDs in there. So that's something that you can run anytime you want to do that. You might be using a worksheet as a template and you want to copy that template. So it might be something where you change the template and then you want to quickly duplicate that 100 times for that. So this is just a very simple way you can do that with this little piece of code, and then, you know, just put your names of your stores in there and away you go. So hopefully that gave you a little taste of what you can do with VBA, and also introduced you to a few things such as variable names, arrays, and creating your own modules, and also using some of these methods and parameters that are attached to these standard Excel objects. So I hope you got a bit out of that. If you got any questions, please ask in YouTube or on the Excel Casts website in the comments section. Cheers for that. Thank you. Bye.